The White Sox comeback bid yesterday fell short, and it's because this team just lacks clutch players. And let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan, contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox got swept in yesterday's doubleheader against the St. Louis Cardinals because, let's face it, they don't have many clutch players, so let's discuss that in the first segment. Then the losing streak has reached 8 games, and with the Sox going to Canada, I fear this losing streak could reach double digits. Let's discuss how Toronto has been rough to the Sox over the years, and if they can limit this losing streak, it will keep the progress you want to see this season. And finally, I want to answer 2 mailbag questions from you, the wonderful everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, so I don't want to come across as I want a bunch of players that are TW, as Hawk Harrelson once said, the will to win. And the will to win is great to have in a player, but it can only apply to a pitcher in baseball because he's the one that actually possesses the ball. Remember, the beauty of baseball is the offense doesn't possess the ball. It's actually the defense. The defense controls everything. And the hitter has to try to stump them, break through, or in some cases, just hit a home run. But it's the pitcher that controls the game. And in a way, he only controls it once the ball is out of his hand. I mean, you think about it, a pitcher can try to locate a pitch, but if he leaves a hanger just a little, or a slider hanging, it's going to get pummeled. Damage will be done. And if contact is made, it's no longer in his hands unless it's hit right to him. He has to rely on 8 of his other teammates to make a play. This isn't like in football, where if Patrick Mahomes throws a pass, he's only relying on one guy. Or in basketball, where Michael Jordan could take over a game. Because once he let go of the ball, the simple logic is the end result was just hoping the ball went through the hoop. He could control that. The hitter can't control what's going to happen with the ball once it's released from a pitcher, for basic concepts there. So you can be a George Brett, major will to win. But the other thing is, it doesn't matter if you're not up in the opportunity to come up at the plate to actually drive in runs. That's why TW actually doesn't matter. That's why one of the reasons why you can mock an owner like Jerry Reinsdorf for saying David Eckstein was my favorite player because all he ever did was beat you. No, he was part of winning teams. He played with, guys like Albert Pujols and other really great players, and he was part of it. And yes, when he did get a opportunity to potentially drive and run or prevent a run, yeah, he could come through with it. But he didn't personally beat any team. He was a replacement level player. And also, it's a 162 game mental grind. So I get, yes, you want guys to care, but even as Will Venables said yesterday, you do have to also flush. He finally mentioned flush it, and I was like, oh, no. But at least he had the proper context in that you take the lessons you need to learn from a loss, but then you got to move on. So, if you're looking for certain players, a winning attitude is a great intangible to have, but a lot of other traits are more desirable to have in baseball, or skills, like hitting with runners in scoring position. Remember, I had Tanner Scott from, Mississippi State legend, the guy that said nerds get out of the baseball, because they don't believe in things like context. And again, I like to marry the two, just like how he wanted to marry the two. But he did bring up hitting with runners in scoring position should be a trait that teams should actually be looking for. And I think that sometimes gets overlooked in the sabermetrics era. And we do look at how can a guy do in a high leverage situation when it comes to pitching. And it is celebrated. And it is part of roster construction. But another part of roster construction I think sometimes gets missed is coming through with timely hits. And obviously it's hard because, again, it's just like with RBIs. One of the reasons why I don't mention a lot of RBIs is because I do subscribe to RBIs is dependent on what other people do ahead of you in the order. So, for example, Juan Gonzalez, he was a great RBI hitter, but he also had getting a lot of opportunities to drive in runs. So that's why I focus more on the slash line of what you do with runners in scoring position, because again, that actually is how many opportunities you've had. So if you have a lot of guys ahead of you on base, yeah, you're going to have a lot of RBIs if you come through, but you've got to have guys ahead. That's why, weighted runs created plus shows the whole value. But again, you've got to be able to drive the run in. I think that sometimes gets missed. And the White Sox just don't have those guys that hit well with runners in scoring position. They also don't have those guys in the bullpen to get, 3 outs in crunch time. So adding more clutch guys is another item we got to add to the checklist of things we would like to see this rebuild produce, or this build, as I like to say. And it was on full display in yesterday's doubleheader. The White Sox were swept by the Cardinals 5-4 in game 1, and they lose 8-6 in game 2. Now, moral victory, at least they came back from being down 6-1 in game 2. Andrew Benintendi hits a grand slam in the 7th. But they just couldn't complete the comeback. And in game 1, it was Cam Boozer blowing a 4-2 lead. In game 2, they just could not come up with that timely hit in the 8th and 9th inning to complete the comeback because they had their opportunities. The Sox went 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Had a chance for a walk-off win in the 9th. However, they had to trust Vinny Capra to pull off a contact play with Mike Tauchman on third. So that also speaks to just get better players. And, players that could actually execute a contact play. Because Capra just bounced one right to Nolan Arenado, one of the best third basemen fielding-wise of all time. I said one of, keyword, so that, again, that's just a population, but he's a very good defensive third baseman. And he easily gunned Tauchman out at home, who also tweaked his groin running for home. So that's the other thing. Can we also, Will Venable, please just put the contact play away. Don't pull it out for the rest of 2025, especially when Mike Tauchman is on third or trying to run home. This is now twice that he's basically pulled a muscle trying to score a winning run or a tying run. He is listed as day-to-day, though. The reports are Brooks Baldwin did get pulled from game action at AAA, so who knows if it's day-to-day. Although maybe, who knows, maybe the White Sox were finally like, you know what, Vinny Capra, this ain't working. We'll see. As I'm recording this, no transactions have taken place. But think about this. The White Sox are 4-20 in single-run games. And if I looked at the end results correctly and counted it up right, and I think a listener also put in the comments, an everydayer, the White Sox have actually just won 3 games by 2 runs. So I believe it is 7-30. The record is when games are decided by 2 runs or less. They've blown 27 leads, which is tops in the leagues. They've also been in 24 games decided in blowout fashion, 5 runs or more. So they're actually in more games this year. They just can't come through, whether it's a timely hit or just getting those late inning outs. They're dead last in the league with a 2.11 average with runners in scoring position. The bullpen is somehow 434, but that's still bottom 10. And for example, they're still asking Cam Boozer to pitch like in the 8th inning when he shouldn't be. In high leverage situations, the slash line against Cam, 382, 463, 67. He's allowed 13 runs in those 15 appearances. Dan Altavilla, he was starting to rise up the trust tree with how dominant he's been since getting called up. He allowed the go-ahead runs in the 10th. And hitting-wise, it's just part of the growth process, too. I do think that is one thing that they will have to grow into. Because Miguel Vargas, for example, with 2 outs in RISP, find out what it means to me, 407, 500, 852 slash line. But in a normal, regular runners in scoring position, 228, 375, 439. But it's just, you got to get a better supporting cast around guys like Vargas. You can't have Vinny Capra on this roster to play late inning defense because the risk is he might have to bat. And that means having his 0.080 average. Again, not even 100 up with runners in scoring position. And if you look at his career lines, oh boy, his RISP is not good. So hopefully during this rebuild, the front office can find some guys who just do better with runners in scoring position and some bullpen arms that can throw up some zeros with the game on the line. All right, so by blowing those two chances, the White Sox losing streak is now at 8 games. And I got a bad feeling that it's going to hit double digits because they got to go to Toronto. And let's discuss how Rogers Center has been a house of horrors lately after the break on Locked On White Sox. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. And I'm a huge fan of the no-shell varieties. My go-to flavors are roasted and salted or the honey roasted. I love the roasted and salted because it has that excellent roasted flavor and has just the right blend of salt that you don't need to chug a gallon of water after consuming a handful of those babies. The honey roasted is just an explosion of honey goodness. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite too. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so I know I've been preaching wins and losses don't matter, but I do have at least one criteria when I want to measure progress this year. Because in the big picture, you kind of have to look at 2025 in the big picture. Can some core players start to emerge? That's, I believe, is happening. What type of, can Will Venable at least show you that he can push the right buttons? Jury's still out. Yesterday probably wasn't his best managing game, at least in game 2. Calling for a contact play. Hopefully that was a contact play. Because if that's Mike Tauchman just running because he wasn't paying attention, that's just another Andrew Vaughn situation. And I don't think Mike Tauchman is that dumb of a baseball player. But when it comes to wins and losses, the one thing you just definitely want to see is, can they not subject us to double-digit losing streaks? And another dollar in mentioning the 2024 season jar for me. But what made that season so miserable was you had to endure 3 double-digit losing streaks. One of them that tied an AL record. Think about it. The first one actually broke a franchise record. The White Sox have now been around. Before 2024, they were around for 124 years. Not exactly a winning tradition, franchise, but the most they ever lost in a row was 12. So if you're going to show progress, at least get back to a franchise standard of at least, hey, when the Sox lose, it's not like in these double-digit losing streak bunches. They will find eventually a way to win where it doesn't seem like, oh my gosh, are they ever going to win again? But in terms of going to a losing streak, reaching double digits, that could happen this weekend, as the Sox have got to go to Canada and face the Blue Jays. Another team over 500 too. They're at 40-34, and you can bet that they've got these 3 games circled as a way to overtake the Yankees in the AL Central or the AL East division race. It's a very tough division. So they just can't overlook the White Sox. They got to look at it and be like, you know what? We got to pound them. We got to beat up on these guys. This is a get-right team. Even though they have been fighting guys a little, fighting teams a little bit better. The one thing and criteria that they still haven't overcome is getting right. Would have been nice for the White Sox to actually expose the Cardinals, but I still believe that they're frauds. I do. You can say, oh, Cardinals, I know you can jump in my comments. I'm sorry. You had a couple of big innings, and that was it. I tip my cap that you got the timely hits where the White Sox didn't, but I'm just not fully convinced that they're going to be there at the end of the season in the postseason race. And if I'm wrong, I'm loud wrong. Oh, well, this isn't a Cardinals show. Okay. It's a Chicago White Sox show. But man, Rogers Center has just been a house of horrors for the White Sox over the past 3 seasons. 2022, they were swept and they were outscored 21-11. 2023, again, swept and absolutely dominated. They got shut out twice and outscored 20-2. Finally won there in 2024, thanks to Garrett Crochet's brilliance in that 5-0 victory. But outside of that, they lost 9-2 and 9-3. And that was during, I believe, that first loss kicked off the 14-game losing streak, if I remember correctly. I try to forget it. And oh, by the way, Bo Bichette, he's back to hitting after a terrible season last year. George Springer, he's also raging against the darkness of his career ending to keep, his career going. He's got 10 home runs on the year. Still got Vlad Guerrero Jr. doing Vlad Guerrero Jr. things. Now, if there is a game to at least snap this losing streak, if you're going to Canada, it is tonight because you got Davis Martin going up against a bullpen game. However, Toronto's bullpen ERA is the 11th best in the league. They got Spencer Turnbull starting tonight. At least that's last time I checked. But otherwise, you got Jose Barrios and Chris Bassett going Saturday and Sunday. And by the way, man, again, we always keep talking, and I know I made the case. Trading Chris Bassett for Jeff Samardzija, to me, is one of the biggest, is even bigger than trading Fernando Tatis for James Shields. Because again, Fernando Tatis was, basically, I think the Padres saw something in him, but I don't think they ever envisioned that he would be an MVP player. I don't even think the White Sox envisioned that he'd be an MVP player. But the other reason why I get so fearful that this losing streak can continue is this team is terrible on the road. I mean, the Rockies now have more wins on the road. By the way, the Rockies are 5-5 over the last 10 games. And they do have 17 wins. They're just 6 wins now behind the White Sox. So maybe they're not going to break last year's infamous record. But the Sox have just 7 road wins. That's another reason why I also fear the White Sox going to Colorado in 2 weeks. That is definitely not a gimme to me because, again, the White Sox play terrible on the road. They just do. And being terrible in Toronto is another reason why I have this fear that this losing streak could reach 11 games. Well, folks, if you do email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, I will try to respond. And if you ask me questions, maybe I'll even address it on this show. And I got 2 interesting ones posted to me over the week that I want to tackle after the break on Locked On White Sox. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Now, the smart way to play is FanDuel's traditional money lines, spreads, and over-unders. But if you want to win big, it's the parlays, props, and futures that you want to play. There's always a chance to at least double or even triple your money and win even more by going with the parlays, props, and futures. For example, they are offering for Sunday's Game 7 a 5-leg same-game parlay of the Pacers on the money line, Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Williams scoring 20-plus points, and Pascal Siakam and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scoring 25-plus points. That was at plus 4,220 the last time I checked. So if it hits and you say you put $10 on it, that can win you $422.06. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. I hope you have a good weekend and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. And again, if you need a baseball electronic pen pal, I'm here. LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. And as long as it remains respectful and it doesn't get all weird, I'll talk baseball with you. I'll write back. However, if I don't respond right away, I do have some life things going on, like taking care of a home, family, work, those types of things. So, maybe take me a few days. And I forgot, I think his name was Dan, who just emailed me yesterday. Shout out. I appreciate you listening on your way into work down in Orlando. So awesome. And I got two great emails from a couple of everydayers that I want to tackle. First, my guy Sydney. This is what he emailed me. The Lakers are being sold. The Chicago White Sox, owned by Jerry Reinsdorf, is the longest family-owned U.S. sports franchise. In my own opinion, Jerry will represent the club publicly while Justin makes decisions. The owner sells the business but keeps it public image. The new owner, shielded from public view, is in charge. Check out Mark Cuban and Jeannie Buss. Gets heating up. He's better at cutting players than last year's front office. And then the other one is from Brian. This is what he writes. Hey, Todd, I was wondering what's your opinion of Nationals manager Davey Martinez publicly saying that the Nationals losing is not on the coaches, it's all on the players. Do you think that comment is likely to divide the clubhouse, especially the fact that he did it publicly? All right, so I did respond to both. All right, to Sydney and, that, but I did want to share it on the air too. So in terms of Getz, I think he is actually safe through 2029 unless this team is not competitive by 2027 and 2028. I don't know what obviously the agreement language between Reinsdorf and Ishbia looks like, but I'm pretty sure it does line out that Jerry's going to be in charge until 2029, that he's not a figurative head. I do think this, kind of Mark Cuban behind the scenes type of thing. I mean, I'm not saying that, Sydney's opinion is wrong. I get the feeling when I read between the lines of he was laid out very clear by the team and made very clear in Jerry's statement. He's in charge until 2029. And I think as long as he's in charge, I don't see him letting his successor influence him to remove his handpicked GM, even though it was one of the worst GM searches ever in the history of baseball. So I just don't see him being on the hot seat. And I talked about it with Jack Ankeny actually last Thursday. While I have been critical of Getz as a major league roster builder, and while I know he's updated the front office, that to me is doing the easy part because he could actually just leverage a 121 loss season to finally tell the owner, hey, we have to do things modernly. He has brought in some smart baseball people, though. That's the one thing I do have to give him credit for. And even some of these guys are probably even more qualified to run the team than him. But I do think he deserves to at least work with these adults in the room through 2027 to see if this front office modernization can produce a winner. If maybe he is a big picture guy. Maybe he should be in charge of the big picture if he can get the smart people. But the smart people then have got to help him influence, like, hey, maybe Dan Altavilla should be starting the season on the 26-man roster instead of Mike Clevenger. Just saying. And that's why I'm not confident in him being the final decision maker. I'm just not. I'm very, very cautious. And before anyone puts in the comments about, hey, well, why can't Jerry just sell now? I've talked about it on past shows, and I'm with you. But I also think if you're Justin Ishbia, why deal with the headache of the next CBA negotiations, where especially your presence might make it harder to get a deal done for the owners? Because if the owners are going to claim poverty, it's going to be very hard for them to do that if they just added another multi-billionaire to the ownership ranks for the players to point to and say, see, he can pay out some of his personal fortune to us. Which on the flip side, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but the one thing I would very, very cautiously tell the players, when the owners do claim poverty, like they will, and yes, the owners are still making tons and tons of money, but they will have to accept that the pie is shrunk because you just can't accept a lot of these billionaires to just share their personal wealth with you. That is kind of selfish because as I keep, I don't want to get too political, but if you're asking billionaires to make you millionaires or multimillionaires, I think it would be better if we asked those billionaires to maybe, I don't know, help cure poverty. I don't know. So you might want to have to take it at their word that, hey, the TV revenues have shrunk. The pie's a little bit, down. So you might want to have a compromise. Obviously, stand your ground and say, we don't want a salary cap. I'm fine with that. That type of stuff. But hey, let Jerry deal with the nonsense. Even if he might be in the background, let Jerry also hassle with state lawmakers for public money for a new stadium. But then take over in 2029 when the CBA landscape has been sorted out. And even take the next couple of years to really plan out where do you want your new ballpark to be, or to develop around Rate Field if that's where you want. Take this time to think big picture about how you can maximize your dollars while hopefully being a rich hobbyist, and hopefully the CBA allows for a rich hobbyist. In terms of Davey Martinez, I want to discuss it because, hey, he is a former Sox player. So here's what his comments were that Brian's referring to. Quote, never on coaching, he told reporters. This is, I pulled this from CBS Sports. Again, quote, never on coaching, he told reporters. Coaches work their bleeps off every single day. They're not going to finger point here and say it's on the coaches. It's never on the coaches. They work hard. The message is clear. All the work is done prior. Sometimes they got to go out there and they got to play the game. It's always been about the players. Always. I played this game a long time. Never once have I blamed the coach for anything. We worked our bleeps off to get better. They gave us information and we used it. These guys understand what the game is, man. I've never had such a group of coaches that work as hard as they do. They're here do diligently. They go over everything. They sit with the players every day. These coaches, they work their bleeps off. I know every coaching staff is like that. And the players, sometimes you got to put the onus on the players. They got to go out there and they got to play the game right, and they play the game the right way. We can't hit for them. We can't catch the ball for them. We can't pitch for them. We can't throw strikes for them. They got to go do that. End quote. All right. So I think he worded that incorrectly because he makes a great point. I mean, a manager and a coach, they're not out there in the batter's box. They're not out there on the mound. I mean, as he said, all they can do is prepare. But I don't think starting your quote off is saying never on the coaching. If the team looks lost, and we saw that with Pedro Gafal, it is on the coaching. And as I replied back, this is why sometimes it is on the coaching, because this is what I believe a manager should do. And if they're failing in any of these, then yes, it is on the coaching. One, they're one part HR workplace environment specialist. Managers and coaches have to keep the clubhouse from being toxic. I mean, Clint Frazier just shared a story of how things got out of control rather quickly for the Sox under Pedro Grifol. Check it out in Foul Territory. They're also, again, one part game prep specialist, as Martinez pointed out. They got to make sure the players are ready to play that game in front of them. So making sure the film study is being done. Players have the scouting and analytics reports. Are the players getting their workouts in? Are the players getting their batting practice in? Making sure the players are positioned correctly defensively. That gets them to also one part, making the correct in-game decisions. For example, did you pinch run your DH who's the catcher, or did you pinch run the catcher while you're DHing your catcher, the other catcher? Because that can leave you at a disadvantage, that type of stuff. One part, serve as a control for the risk of the computer spitting out a lineup card that doesn't make any sense. I don't have an issue of the front office or the analytics guys recommending this is what the lineup should be every day. I have no problem, plugging in an algorithm to look at matchups, that type of stuff, all that stuff. But I do think sometimes the analytics guys can miss out on context. I think sometimes when you look at the numbers in a black and white and not, in a vacuum, you can miss out on a ton of context. And maybe sometimes you're putting players then in the lineup where you want to be like, I don't care what the historical trends say. The current state is this guy can't hit. So just being able to take a look and say, yeah, Vinny Capra, he isn't starting today, type of control. One part armchair psychologist to tell us that struggling player, it will be okay. Let's just keep working. That's one of the reasons why I do like managers that have big league experience, to be able to say, I've been through it. I know what you're going through. One part, again, accountability standard holder. These guys aren't working. They aren't playing. One part working with the front office in the big picture to make sure the team is constructed to win games. And then one part backup problem solvers. Because I do like, for example, I know it's more Nationals business, but when it comes to the White Sox, I do like how they have a director of hitting and pitching for the entire organization. But sometimes maybe Ryan Fuller and Brian Bannister don't have all the answers. So having Ethan Katz and Marcus Thames, and I know a lot of you don't think Marcus Thames has solutions, or even Will Venable maybe coming up with some other solutions. I think that's perfectly acceptable. So Martinez is right that in the coaches and him don't hit, pitch, or field. But if the team starts to slip in any of those areas I listed above, then yeah, it's on the managers and the coaches. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back on Monday to discuss how the Sox did in Toronto and have a minor league Monday report. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the Sox not having clutch players, Rogers Center being a house of horrors for the White Sox, and 2 mailbag questions. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.